Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable life of a woman whose existence was part performance, part endurance, and entirely misunderstood by most of the Western world, the geisha. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. The geisha's first Okaya performance. In the heart of 18th century Kyoto, where the Kamo River shimmered under lantern light, Akahana, a young Maiko of 16, stood on the cusp of her first performance at the prestigious Hanabusa Okaya. The year was 1752, and the Gion district buzzed with anticipation as wealthy merchants, samurai, and scholars gathered in tea houses to witness the artistry of geishas. Akahana's life had been a tapestry of discipline and sacrifice, woven thread by thread through years of training in the Okiya, the geisha house that had become her world. Her survival in this glittering yet unforgiving realm depended on her ability to captivate, to transform herself into a living work of art, and tonight was her chance to prove her worth. Akahana's journey began at 9, when her impoverished family in a rural village sold her to the Nakamura Okiya to settle debts. The Okiya's Okasan, a stern woman named Madame Kiyomi, saw potential in Akahana's delicate features and quick wit. From that moment, Akahana's childhood vanished, replaced by a relentless schedule of lessons in dance, music, and etiquette. Her fingers, now calloused, bore the marks of countless hours plucking the shamisen, its strings biting into her skin as she mastered melancholic melodies. She learned the koto, its resonant notes echoing the elegance of Kyoto's seasons, and studied the intricate steps of the Aini no Mai, a dance mimicking the grace of rice stalks in the wind. Her voice, trained to carry poetry and song, could soften the hardest samurai's heart, or so Madame Kiyomi promised. Survival in the Okiya was no small feat. Akahana shared a cramped room with 3 other Maiko, their tatami mats worn from years of use. Meals were modest: rice, miso, and pickled radish, unless a patron's generosity brought fish or sweets. Every kimono, every hair ornament, every drop of sake she would pour tonight was a debt to the Okiya, tallied meticulously by Madame Kiyomi. Akahana's earnings would first repay these costs, a burden that could take years to lift. Failure to please patrons meant disgrace, or worse, expulsion to a life of destitution. Yet Akahana harbored a quiet fire within her, a determination to rise as a geisha of renown, not merely to survive, but to carve a name in Gion's history. On the evening of her debut, Akahana awoke before dawn, her breath visible in the chilly air of the Okiya's wooden corridors. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin until it glowed, then sat as an older geisha applied her makeup. The white ashuroi paste transformed her face into a porcelain mask, her lips painted a vivid crimson, and her eyes accented with delicate black lines. Her hair, styled in the wear-shinobu style of a young Maiko, was adorned with kanzashi pins shaped like plum blossoms, a nod to the early spring. Her kimono, a deep indigo with silver crane patterns, weighed heavily on her slight frame, its obi tied so tightly she could only take shallow breaths. Every detail was a performance, a testament to her training, and a reminder of the stakes. The Hanabusa Okaya stood at the end of a narrow street, its wooden facade glowing with the soft light of paper lanterns. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sandalwood incense and the murmur of men in fine silk robes. Akahana's heart pounded as she entered, her geta clogs clicking softly on the polished floor. The room was a kaleidoscope of wealth. Merchants with gold-trimmed fans, samurai with swords at their sides, and scholars quoting poetry over cups of sake. Madame Kiyomi had warned her to be flawless. Every gesture, every word, every note had to be perfect. Akahana knelt beside a low table, her movements fluid as she poured sake for a merchant named Lord Takayama, a man known for his discerning taste. As the evening unfolded, Akahana's training came alive. She played the shamisen, her fingers coaxing a haunting melody that silenced the room. Her dance, the Sakura no Odori, told the story of cherry blossoms falling in a spring breeze, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked petals in flight. The guests watched, entranced, their eyes following her every move. Lord Takayama, a widower in his 40s, leaned forward, his face softening. He praised her skill, his words laced with a warmth that hinted at interest beyond her art. Akahana smiled demurely, her training guiding her to charm without crossing boundaries. The role of a geisha was to be a companion of intellect and grace, not a courtesan, though rumors often blurred the lines. In Gion's world, a geisha's personal life was a tightly guarded secret. Romantic entanglements were rare, as they could jeopardize a geisha's career and the Okia's reputation. Akahana had been taught to deflect advances with wit, to keep patrons enchanted yet at a distance. Yet Lord Takayama's attention lingered, and by the night's end, he requested a private meeting with Madame Kiyomi. The Okasan later informed Akahana that Takayama wished to become her Dana, a patron who would provide financial support in exchange for exclusive company. This arrangement, while prestigious, carried weight. A Dana's support could ease Akahana's debts, but it demanded loyalty and discretion. Intimacy, if it occurred, was a private matter, negotiated carefully and rarely discussed. Akahana, still young, felt a mix of pride and trepidation. She accepted, knowing it secured her place in the Okiya, but her heart remained focused on her art. The night ended with applause, and Akahana returned to the Okiya exhausted but triumphant. Her performance had earned her a small purse of coins, a fraction of which she kept after the Okiya's share. As she lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Kamo River lulling her to sleep, she dreamed of the day she might own her freedom. For now, survival meant pleasing her patrons, perfecting her craft, and navigating the delicate balance of charm and restraint. Akahana's life was a performance, and the stage of Gion demanded nothing less than perfection. The geisha's winter survival. In the winter of 1860, the Gion district of Kyoto lay under a blanket of snow, its narrow streets silent save for the crunch of geta clogs and the occasional clatter of a rickshaw. Sayuri, a geisha in her mid-20s, faced the lean months when patrons retreated to their estates, and the Okaya tea-houses grew quiet. Her life in the Hashimoto Okiya was one of beauty and hardship, a delicate dance of artistry and survival in a world where a geisha's livelihood depended on her ability to enchant. The winter tested her resilience, forcing her to rely on her skills, her wit, and the fragile bonds of her Okiya to endure. Sayuri's journey to geishahood began a decade earlier, when she was sold to the Okiya at 14 by her fisherman father from a coastal village. The Hashimoto Okiya, run by the formidable Madame Tomo, was a place of strict hierarchy. Sayuri's early years were grueling. She scrubbed floors, served tea, and endured endless lessons in dance, shamisen, and the art of conversation. Her hands, once soft from hauling nets, grew rough from plucking strings and folding origami for guests. She learned to perform the kitsune no yomiri, a dance mimicking a fox's wedding procession, its steps intricate and demanding. Her voice, trained to sing wistful ballads, carried the weight of her rural roots, a quality that set her apart in Gion's polished circles. Winter in Gion was a time of scarcity. The Okaya, where Sayuri performed, relied on wealthy patrons, but cold weather kept many away. Without performances, her income dwindled, and the Okiya's stores of rice and charcoal ran low. Sayuri's survival hinged on supplementing her earnings through other skills. She turned to calligraphy, a craft she had mastered under Madame Tomo's tutelage. In a small room lit by a single lantern, she spent hours grinding ink and writing poems on rice paper. Her verses, often about fleeting snow or the Kamo River's icy flow, were sold to merchants and scholars who admired her artistry. Each sale brought a few coins, enough to buy fish or fuel, but the work was slow, and her debts to the Okiya loomed large. The Okiya was both a refuge and a cage. Sayuri shared a tatami room with two other geishas, their futons rolled tightly during the day to make space. Meals were sparse, barley porridge, pickled plums, and tea, unless a patron sent gifts. Madame Tomo, ever watchful, ensured every expense, from Sayuri's silk kimonos to her hairpins, was recorded. A geisha's debts could take a lifetime to repay, and Sayuri's only path to freedom was through consistent earnings. She learned to mend her own kimonos, stitching delicate patterns to extend their life, and bartered with local seamstresses for scraps of silk to repair her obi. Her days began before dawn, practicing dance steps in the Okia's courtyard, her breath clouding in the frosty air. Sayuri's personal life was a tightly guarded secret, as geishas were expected to remain unattached. Romantic entanglements, if discovered, could ruin her reputation and anger her patrons. Yet, in the quiet of winter, Sayuri found solace in a forbidden connection. A young scholar named Kenji, a frequent guest at the Okaya, admired her poetry and wit. Their conversations, held over cups of sake, grew intimate, though never physical. Kenji gifted her a book of tanka poetry, a gesture that warmed her heart but carried risk. Sayuri hid the book beneath her futon, knowing Madame Tomo would disapprove. Their bond was one of shared intellect, a rare escape from the performative world of Gion, but Sayuri knew it could not last. A geisha's loyalty was to her Okiya, and love was a luxury she could ill afford. To survive the winter, Sayuri sought out smaller engagements. She performed at a local temple's winter festival, her fan dance drawing a modest crowd. The tips, though small, bought charcoal to warm the Okiya. She also taught calligraphy to a merchant's daughter, earning a basket of dried fish in return. These efforts, combined with her poetry sales, kept her afloat, but the strain was constant. She navigated Gion's social web with care, charming patrons without crossing boundaries, her smile a mask for her exhaustion. Rumors of geishas forming romantic ties with patrons circulated, but Sayuri knew such arrangements were rare and fraught with danger. Adana, a patron who offered financial support, might expect companionship, but intimacy was a private matter, negotiated discreetly and never guaranteed. One evening, as snow fell outside the Okaya, Sayuri entertained a small group of merchants. Her shamisen filled the room with a melody of longing, and her conversation sparkled with tales of Kyoto's history. A merchant offered to become her dana, but Sayuri, wary of losing her autonomy, declined politely, citing her dedication to her art. The decision was risky. His support could have eased her debts, but she valued her independence. As spring approached, the Okaya grew busier, and Sayuri's performances resumed. She lay awake at night, dreaming of a day when her debts would be paid, and she could write poetry for herself, not for survival. For now, she was Gion's daughter, her life a delicate balance of beauty, duty, and quiet resilience. The geisha and the samurai's secret. In the bustling city of Edo in 1785, where the Sumida River glittered under the moon and the air carried the scent of cedar and cherry blossoms, Miyako, a geisha of 22, moved through the lantern-lit streets of the Yoshiwara Pleasure District with the grace of a heron. Her life was a delicate balance of artistry and obligation, her days filled with the demands of the Katsura Okiya and her nights spent entertaining the elite at exclusive banquets. Tonight, she was to perform at the Sakura Tea House, where samurai, merchants, and poets gathered to escape the rigid hierarchies of Tokugawa Japan. Among them was Taro, a young samurai whose quiet intensity and love for poetry had begun to stir something forbidden in Miyako's heart. Miyako's journey to geishahood began at 11, when her family, impoverished rice farmers from a village near Osaka, sold her to the Okiya to settle debts. The Katsura Okiya, run by the formidable Madame Haney, was a world of discipline and beauty. Miyako's early years were a blur of lessons. She mastered the shamisen, its strings leaving her fingers raw. She learned the intricate steps of the Ayam no Mai, a dance inspired by irises swaying in the wind, and she studied poetry, her voice trained to recite verses with a cadence that could silence a room. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her sharpest tool, allowing her to navigate the desires of men without crossing the boundaries of her role. A geisha was an artist, not a courtesan, though the line was often blurred in the eyes of outsiders. Survival in Yoshiwara was a daily negotiation. The Okiya provided Miyako with kimonos of silk dyed in indigo and crimson, hairpins adorned with jade, and lessons that shaped her into a vision of elegance. But every luxury came at a cost, tallied in Madame Haney's ledger. Miyako's earnings, tips from banquets, fees for performances, went first to repay these debts, leaving her with little. She shared a tatami room with two other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were simple: rice, miso soup, and pickled bamboo shoots, unless a patron sent gifts of fish or mochi. Winter was harsh, the Okia's wooden walls offering little warmth, and Miyako learned to mend her own kimonos, stitching delicate patterns to extend their life. Failure to please patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution or worse in Yoshiwara's unforgiving streets. The Sakura Tea House was a haven of opulence, its sliding doors painted with cherry blossoms and its floors polished to a mirror sheen. Miyako arrived early, her makeup a flawless mask of white osheroi, her lips a vivid scarlet, and her eyes accented with kohl. Her kimono, a pale green with gold-embroidered waves, rustled softly as she knelt to pour sake for the guests. The room buzzed with laughter and the clink of cups, but Miyako's focus was on Taro, a samurai in his late 20s whose clan served the shogun. Unlike the boisterous merchants, Taro was reserved, his dark eyes following her as she performed. Her recitation of a waka poem about fleeting moonlight drew a rare smile from him, and when she played the shamisen, its mournful notes seemed to speak to him alone. Their connection began months earlier, at a smaller banquet where Taro praised her poetry. Over time, their conversations deepened, moving from polite exchanges to discussions of Basho's haikus and the transient beauty of life. Taro, bound by the samurai code of Bushido, could not openly court a geisha, and Miyako knew the risks of attachment. A geisha's personal life was a tightly guarded secret. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger the Okiya. Yet they began exchanging letters, hidden in the folds of her kimono or passed through a trusted maid. Taro's words, written in elegant calligraphy, spoke of longing and restraint, never crossing into impropriety. Miyako treasured these letters, hiding them beneath a loose floorboard in her room, knowing discovery could end her career. Survival meant balancing her heart and her duties. By day, Miyako practiced her dance, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling leaves. She visited seamstresses to repair her obi, bartering poems for silk scraps. She entertained at smaller tea houses, her charm earning tips that kept the Okiya's lanterns lit. At night, she performed at grand banquets, her shamisen and wit captivating crowds. Taro's presence at these events was both a comfort and a danger. Their glances were fleeting, their words careful, but each meeting deepened their bond. Intimacy, in the physical sense, was unthinkable. Their connection was intellectual and emotional, a rare defiance of Yoshiwara's rules. One evening, as autumn leaves fell outside the tea house, Taro requested a private audience with Miyako. Madame Haney, sensing a lucrative opportunity, agreed. In a quiet room, Taro offered to become her Dana, a patron who would provide financial support. The proposal was a lifeline. Miyako's debts were mounting, and Adana's support could secure her future. But it also carried weight. Adana's relationship with a geisha was professional, focused on companionship and artistry, though rumors of deeper ties persisted in Yoshiwara. Miyako, wary of losing her autonomy, hesitated. She valued Taro's mind, not his wealth, and feared a formal arrangement would taint their bond. She declined gently, promising to remain his favorite performer. The decision strained her position. Madame Haney, displeased, increased Miyako's workload, scheduling her for back-to-back performances. Exhaustion set in, but Miyako endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. She and Taro continued their secret correspondence, their letters a thread of hope in a world of obligation. As winter approached, Miyako dreamed of a day when she might repay her debts and live freely, perhaps even with Taro, though she knew such dreams were fragile. For now, she was a geisha, her life a performance, her heart a secret hidden in the folds of her kimono. The geisha's training endurance. In the spring of 1680, in the heart of Kyoto's Gion district, 15-year-old Hana stood at the threshold of her new life in the Yamato Okiya. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, their petals drifting through the air like snow, but Hana's world was one of discipline, not beauty. Sold to the Okiya by her family, tenant farmers struggling to survive a drought, Hana had left behind her rural life for the glittering but grueling path to becoming a geisha. Her survival depended on pleasing Madame Setsuko, the Okiya's stern matriarch, and mastering the arts that would transform her into a vision of elegance. At 15, her days were a marathon of training, her nights filled with dreams of freedom, and her personal life a distant hope, sacrificed to the demands of her craft. Hana's arrival at the Yamato Okiya was a shock. The wooden house, with its sliding shoji screens and tatama floors, was a far cry from her family's mud-walled hut. But the warmth of home was absent. Madame Setsuko, a former geisha with a gaze sharp as a katana, laid out the rules. Hana would train in dance, music, and etiquette until she was deemed ready to debut as a maiko. Every kimono, every meal, every lesson added to her debt, a sum she would repay through years of performances. Failure meant expulsion, a fate that could lead to a life of begging or worse. Hana, small and wiry, felt the weight of this new world but resolved to endure, driven by a quiet determination to honor her family's sacrifice. Her days began before dawn, the air cool and heavy with the scent of cedar. She bathed in a wooden tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a maiko. Breakfast was a bowl of rice porridge and pickled radish, eaten quickly before lessons began. Her first task was dance, under the tutelage of Mistress Keed, a former dancer whose patience was as thin as her bamboo cane. Hana learned the Kyo no Hana, a dance mimicking the grace of Kyoto's flowers, its steps requiring precision and stamina. Her legs trembled after hours of practice, but she dared not falter, knowing Mistress Keed's cane-awaited mistakes. By noon, her body ached, but she moved to music lessons, plucking the shamisen until her fingers bled, the strings leaving welts on her skin. The tea ceremony was next, a ritual of elegance that demanded focus. Hana knelt for hours, learning to whisk matcha with a bamboo chasen, her movements precise to avoid Madame Setsuko's disapproval. Conversation lessons followed, where she practiced the art of witty banter, her rural accent softened into Kyoto's refined dialect. She memorized poems by Ono no Kamachi, her voice trained to carry their melancholy. Evenings were spent cleaning, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, mending kimonos, to earn her keep. Sleep came late, on a thin futon shared with 3 other girls, their whispers of exhaustion a faint comfort in the dark. Survival in the Okiya was a test of endurance. Hana's debts mounted with every silk kimono, every hairpin shaped like a crane or chrysanthemum. She learned to sew, repairing her practice robes with careful stitches to save costs. Food was scarce when patrons were few, and Hana grew adept at stretching meals, mixing barley into rice to fill her stomach. She bartered with a local seamstress, offering to copy poems for scraps of silk to patch her obi. The other girls, some kind, some cruel, were both allies and rivals. Hana befriended Yumi, a maiko a year ahead, who taught her how to tie an obi tightly enough to hide hunger pangs. But rivalry simmered. Every girl vied for Madame Setsuko's favor, knowing only the best would debut. Hana's personal life was non-existent. At 15, she was too young for patrons, and romance was forbidden. Madame Setsuko warned that love was a distraction, a path to ruin. Geishas were to be artists, their charm professional, their hearts guarded. Hana heard whispers of older geishas with danas, patrons who offered financial support, but such arrangements were years away for her. She dreamed of her village, of her younger brother playing by the river, but those memories faded under the weight of her training. Her only solace was calligraphy, a skill she practiced in stolen moments. She wrote poems about the wind, hiding them beneath her futon, knowing Madame Setsuko would disapprove of such personal indulgences. One spring evening, Hana was allowed to observe a banquet at the Kiku Okaya, a preview of her future. She watched senior geishas perform, their shamisen melodies and fan dances captivating samurai and merchants. Their laughter was practiced, their movements flawless, but Hana saw the exhaustion in their eyes. She vowed to master her craft, not just to survive, but to shine. Back at the Okiya, she practiced late into the night, her shamisen's notes mingling with the sound of crickets. Her fingers, once soft from farm work, were now calloused, her body lean from endless practice. She was no longer the village girl but a maiko in the making, her life bound to the Okiya's walls. As months passed, Hana's skills grew. Mistress Keed praised her dance, and Madame Setsuko noted her progress with a rare nod. But the pressure never eased. A mistake, a dropped fan, a sour note, could set her back months. Hana endured, her eyes fixed on her debut. when she would perform for patrons and begin repaying her debts. She dreamed of a day when she might be free, perhaps owning a small tea house. But for now, survival meant obedience, perfection, and sacrifice. In the quiet of Gion's nights, as cherry blossoms fell, Hannah whispered her poems to the stars, her heart a silent rebellion against the life she was bound to lead. The Geisha's festival performance. In the summer of 1790, the Gion district of Kyoto came alive with the vibrant chaos of the Gion Matsuri, a festival honoring the Yasaka shrine and warding off pestilence. The streets were a riot of color, with towering Yama floats adorned with silk tapestries and the air thick with the scent of grilled squid and incense. Kikuko, a geisha of 24, stood at the heart of this celebration, her role both a privilege and a necessity. As a member of the Tachibana Okiya, her survival depended on the festival's earnings, where her performances could draw generous tips from merchants, samurai, and pilgrims. Her life was a delicate balance of artistry and obligation, her personal desires buried beneath the weight of her kimono and the expectations of Gion's elite. Kikuko's journey to geishahood began a decade earlier, when her family, silk weavers from a village near Nara, sold her to the Okiya to escape poverty. At 14, she entered a world of relentless discipline under Madame Yaju, the Okiya's matriarch, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Kikuko's days were consumed by training. She learned the shamisen, its strings leaving her fingers raw, mastered the fan dance Kyo no Yumen, its steps mimicking plum blossoms in bloom, and studied the tea ceremony, her hands steady as she whisked matcha. Her wit, honed through years of banter with older geishas, became her shield, allowing her to charm without crossing the boundaries of her role. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though the festival's crowds often misunderstood her purpose. The Gion Matsuri was a critical time for Kikuko. Summer brought fewer patrons to the Okaya tea houses, as Kyoto's elite retreated to cooler estates. The festival, however, drew crowds, and Kikuko's performances were her chance to supplement the Okiya's lean coffers. Her debts, to Madame Yaju for her kimonos, lessons, and even the rice she ate, were a constant shadow. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a dragonfly, added to her ledger. Failure to earn during the festival could mean a winter of hunger, shared with the Okiya's other geishas in their cramped tatami room. Kikuko had learned to stretch meals, mixing millet into rice, and to mend her kimonos, her needle threading patterns of cherry blossoms to hide wear. On the festival's opening day, Kikuko awoke before dawn, the air heavy with summer heat. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran until it glowed, then sat as an older geisha applied her makeup. The white ashuroi paste transformed her face into a porcelain mask, her lips painted a vivid crimson, and her eyes accented with delicate kohl. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with silver pins that glinted in the lantern light. Her kimono, a deep violet with gold-embroidered waves, weighed heavily, its obi tied so tightly she moved with measured grace. Every detail was a performance, a testament to her training, and a reminder of the stakes. The festival stage was set in a courtyard near the Yasaka shrine, where merchants and pilgrims gathered under paper lanterns. Kikuko's performance was the Kyo no Yumen, a fan dance that told of spring's renewal. As she stepped onto the wooden platform, the crowd hushed, their eyes following her every move. Her fans traced arcs through the air, mimicking petals falling in a breeze, her steps precise despite the heat. The shamisen, played by a fellow geisha, wove a melody that echoed Kyoto's rivers. Kikuko's voice joined in, singing a ballad of fleeting beauty, its notes carrying over the crowd. The audience, from wealthy traders to humble farmers, tossed coins into a lacquered box, their generosity a lifeline for the Okiya. Kikuko's role demanded charm, but her personal life was tightly controlled. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the Okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements, if discovered, could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. During the festival, men often mistook her smiles for invitation, but Kikuko deflected their advances with practiced wit, offering poetry or a playful jest. She had no dana, no patron to ease her debts, and preferred it that way, valuing her autonomy. Yet, in quiet moments, she felt the weight of isolation. Her only solace was poetry, scribbled on rice paper in the Okia's dim light, hidden beneath her futon to avoid Madame Yaja's disapproval. One evening, a merchant named Lord Sato, a festival regular, requested a private tea ceremony. Kikuko obliged, kneeling in a small Okaya room to serve him matcha. His compliments were lavish, his purse heavy with coins, but his gaze lingered too long. Kikuko kept her smile professional. Her conversation focused on Kyoto's history and the festival's rituals. Sato hinted at becoming her Dana, but Kikuko demurred, citing her dedication to her craft. Intimacy, even in such arrangements, was rare and discreet, a private matter negotiated carefully. She left the meeting with a generous tip, but no commitment, her heart untouched. The festival's final day brought a grand procession, and Kikuko joined other geishas in a parade, their kimonos a rainbow against the Yama floats. She danced for hours, her body aching but her spirit buoyed by the crowd's applause. The coins collected would buy charcoal and rice for the Okiya, easing the winter ahead. Back at the Okiya, Kikuko counted her earnings, a small fraction hers after Madame Yaja's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of festival drums fading, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps opening a tea house of her own. For now, she was Gion's daughter, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse unspoken. The Mesopotamian farmers toil. In the fertile plains of Sumer, near the city of Uruk in 3000 BCE, Enlil toiled under the relentless sun, his hands calloused from years of tending barley fields. The Euphrates River, a lifeline for his crops, shimmered in the distance, its waters channeled through a network of canals he maintained with backbreaking labor. At 30, Enlil was a farmer whose survival depended on the land's bounty and the favor of the gods. His wife, Inanna, wove reeds into baskets to supplement their income, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of sowing, harvesting, and prayer. In a world governed by priests and kings, Enlil's existence was one of toil, community, and quiet devotion, his personal life a private bond overshadowed by the demands of survival. Enlil's life was tied to the land from childhood. Born to a farming family in a mud-brick village outside Uruk, he learned to wield a wooden plow and repair canals before he could read cuneiform. His father taught him to read the river's moods, to know when its floods would nourish or destroy. At 20, Enlil married Inanna, a weaver's daughter, in a ceremony blessed by a priest of Ninkasi, the goddess of grain. Their marriage was arranged, a union of practicality, but affection grew through shared labor. Their home, a modest mud-brick house with a reed roof, was filled with the scent of barley and the hum of Inanna's loom. Survival meant working as one, their days a cycle of planting, harvesting, and bartering at Uruk's bustling market. The barley fields were Enlil's domain. Each morning, he rose before dawn, the air cool and heavy with dew. He checked the canals, clearing silt with a hoe to ensure water reached his crops. The fields, golden under the sun, stretched across the plain, their yield vital for food and trade. Enlil sowed barley in autumn, praying to Enki for fertile soil, and harvested in spring, his sickle flashing as he cut stalks. Surplus grain was bartered for tools, clay pots, or wool, while some was offered to the temple as tribute. Drought or pests could spell ruin, and Enlil learned to store grain in sealed jars, guarding against lean years. His body, lean and scarred from labor, bore the marks of a life spent wrestling with the earth. Inanna's work was no less vital. By day, she gathered reeds from the riverbank, her hands deftly weaving them into baskets sold to merchants or used to store grain. Her skill earned them extra barley or dates, easing the burden of temple taxes. She also tended a small garden of onions and lentils, her fingers stained with soil. Their home was simple, a single room with a clay hearth, reed mats, and a wooden chest for their few possessions, a bronze knife, a clay figurine of Inanna's namesake goddess, and a woven blanket. Meals were barley bread, lentil stew, and date beer, shared with their 2 young sons, who played among the reeds. Survival required community. Enlil worked alongside other farmers to maintain canals, their labor coordinated by a temple overseer. They shared tools and seeds, their laughter a brief respite from toil. Inanna joined village women to weave and gossip, their hands moving in rhythm. Festivals, like the Akitu celebrating the new year, brought relief. Enlil and Inanna offered barley to the temple, joining dances under torchlight. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond expressed in quiet moments, shared glances over the hearth, a hand on a shoulder after a long day. Physical affection was restrained, as Sumerian custom valued modesty, and their focus was on family and survival. The market in Uruk was Enlil's lifeline. He hauled barley in reed baskets, bartering for salt, fish, or copper. Merchants in linen kilts haggled fiercely, and Enlil learned to negotiate, his voice steady despite his fatigue. Inanna's baskets fetched a good price, their intricate patterns prized by traders. Temple taxes, paid in grain, were a constant burden, and Enlil prayed daily to avoid the wrath of priests who could seize his land. He carved cuneiform tallies on clay tablets, tracking his debts, though he relied on a scribe to read them. Failure to pay could mean servitude, a fate Enlil dreaded for his sons. One summer, a drought threatened the fields. Enlil worked tirelessly, digging new channels to divert water, his back aching under the sun. Inanna prayed to Inanna's temple, offering a basket woven with prayers. The community rallied, sharing water and grain, their survival collective. Enlil's hands bled from digging, but the crops survived, a testament to his endurance. At night, he and Inanna sat by the hearth, their sons asleep, and spoke of the future, more fields, perhaps a goat. Their bond, forged in hardship, was their strength. Intimacy was a quiet comfort, a private ritual in a life ruled by labor and faith. As years passed, Enlil's fields prospered, his sons learning to plow beside him. He dreamed of a larger house, perhaps with a second room, but survival came first. The Euphrates flowed, the gods watched, and Enlil toiled, his life a testament to the land's unyielding demands and the quiet love that sustained him. The Egyptian scribe's dedication. In the bustling city of Thebes in 2500 BCE, where the Nile River shimmered under the relentless sun, Tahotep, a scribe of 32, sat cross-legged in the cool shade of a temple courtyard, his reed stylus poised over a sheet of papyrus. His life was one of precision and privilege, his literacy a rare gift that elevated him above farmers and laborers in the rigid hierarchy of ancient Egypt. As a servant of the temple of Ammonius, Tahotep recorded taxes, offerings, and decrees, his work ensuring the temple's wealth and the favor of the gods. His survival depended on his skill, his loyalty to the priests, and his ability to navigate the intricate politics of Thebes, while his personal life, shared with his wife, Merit, a weaver, was a quiet anchor in a world of duty. Tahotep's journey to scribehood began at 10, when his father, a minor official, enrolled him in the temple's scribal school. There, he memorized hieroglyphs, his fingers stained with ink as he practiced on broken pottery shards. He learned to calculate grain yields, measure land, and draft letters for priests, his mind sharpened by years of study. By 20, he was a scribe, his status marked by a linen kilt and a reed case slung over his shoulder. The temple provided a modest home, a mud brick house with a flat roof and a small courtyard, along with rations of bread, beer, and onions. But his position was precarious. A mistake in his records could anger a priest, risking demotion or worse. Survival in Thebes was a balance of skill and caution. Tahotep's days began at dawn, when he joined other scribes in the temple's scriptorium, a room of flickering oil lamps and papyrus scrolls. He recorded the barley and emmer wheat delivered by farmers, his stylus scratching precise tallies. He noted offerings of linen and geese for Ammonius' altar, ensuring every item was accounted for. His work was meticulous, as errors could be seen as defiance of the gods. By noon, the heat was oppressive, and he retreated to the courtyard, sipping beer and eating bread with garlic. Afternoons were spent drafting letters for priests or inspecting granaries, his sandals dusty from Thebes' streets. At night, he returned home, his body aching but his mind alert, ready to correct any scroll deemed faulty. Tahotep's home was a sanctuary. Merit, whom he married at 25 in an arranged union, wove linen for the temple, her loom a constant hum in their courtyard. Their house was simple, a main room with reed mats, a clay oven, and a shrine to Hathor, goddess of love. They had a daughter, Nefert, who played with clay dolls by the Nile. Meals were modest, barley bread, lentils, and dates, supplemented by fish, when Tahotep's work earned extra rations. Merits weaving brought in small payments, bartered for oil or sandals, easing the family's needs. Their marriage was practical, rooted in mutual respect, with affection expressed in quiet moments, a shared meal, a laugh over Nefert's antics. Intimacy was private, a matter of duty and comfort, as public displays were frowned upon in Egypt's reserved culture. The temple's demands shaped Tahotep's life. He joined festivals, like the Opet, where Ammonia's statue was paraded through Thebes. He offered papyrus scrolls to the god, praying for prosperity. His literacy made him a mediator between farmers and priests, settling disputes over taxes. He bartered his skills, copying spells for amulets to earn extra grain. Yet, his position brought scrutiny. A rival scribe, Senenmut, coveted Tahotep's role, and rumors of errors could undermine his standing. Tahotep learned to flatter priests, offering poems praising Ammonius to secure favor. His evenings were spent teaching Nefert to read, hoping she might marry a scribe and rise above her mother's labor. Personal life was secondary to duty. Romance, as moderns might know it, was absent. Marriage was a contract, and Tahotep's bond with Merit grew through shared responsibility. They spoke of expanding their home, perhaps adding a room for Nefert, but survival came first. One summer, a poor harvest strained the temple's stores, and Tahotep worked late, recalculating taxes to appease angry priests. Merit wove extra linen, her fingers calloused, to trade for food. Their intimacy was a quiet refuge, a moment of closeness after long days, but always within the bounds of custom. Tahotep dreamed of rising to chief scribe, a role that would bring a larger home and fewer worries, but he knew the gods and priests held his fate. As years passed, Tahotep's reputation grew. His scrolls were flawless, his calculations precise, and the priests rewarded him with a copper bracelet. He taught Nefert hieroglyphs, her small hands mimicking his. At night, he and Merit sat by the Nile, watching boats drift under the stars, their bond a steady thread in a life of ink and duty. Tahotep's world was one of papyrus and prayer, his survival a testament to his skill and the quiet love that sustained him. The Roman artisan's craft. In the bustling streets of Rome in 50 CE, where the Tiber River wound past temples and markets, Lucius, a potter of 35, worked in a cramped workshop near the Forum Boreum. His hands, rough from years of shaping clay, crafted amphorae for wine merchants, their sturdy forms a staple of Rome's trade. Lucius's life was one of labor and pride, his survival tied to the kilns that glowed orange in his courtyard and the market where he sold his wares. His wife, Flavia, managed their modest home, her frugality ensuring they weathered Rome's unpredictable economy. Their marriage, a partnership of necessity, was warmed by affection, their personal life a private bond in a city of noise and ambition. Lucius's craft was his inheritance. Born to a potter's family in a Subura tenement, he learned to knead clay and fire pots as a boy, his fingers guided by his father's calloused hands. At 20, he opened his own workshop, a small space with a wheel, a kiln, and shelves of drying pots. His amphorae, marked with his sigil, a stylized bull, were prized for their durability, holding wine or oil for merchants shipping to Gaul or Egypt. The workshop was his world, its air thick with clay dust and the scent of burning wood. Rome's demand for pottery kept him busy, but competition was fierce, and Lucius's survival depended on quality and reputation. His days began at dawn, when he lit the kiln, its heat a constant companion. He mixed clay from the Tiber's banks, kneading it with water until it was pliable. His wheel spun, his hands shaping amphorae with swift precision, each vessel identical yet unique. By noon, he loaded the kiln, praying to Fornax, goddess of ovens, for a flawless firing. A cracked pot meant lost income, and Lucius had learned to judge the clay's moisture and the fire's heat. Afternoons were spent at the market, haggling with merchants who demanded discounts. He bartered pots for bread, olives, or wool, his voice hoarse from shouting over the crowds. Evenings brought repairs, patching the kiln, sharpening tools, Before he returned home, his tunic dusted with clay. Flavia was his anchor. Married at 25, their union was arranged by their families, but love grew through shared hardship. Flavia, a baker's daughter, managed their insula apartment, a second-floor room with a brazier and straw mattresses. She cooked barley porridge and lentils, stretching their coin to include fish on festival days. She mended Lucius's tunics, her needle deft, and sold surplus bread to neighbors, adding to their savings. Their home was simple: a clay lamp, a wooden table, and a shrine to Vesta, goddess of the hearth. They had no children yet, a quiet sorrow, but Flavia's smile eased the ache. Their intimacy was private, a comfort after long days, restrained by Roman modesty and the thin walls of their insula. Survival required ingenuity. Lucius diversified his craft, making cups and lamps for local taverns, their simpler shapes fetching smaller but steady profits. He joined a collegium, a potter's guild, sharing tools and kiln space with others. Festivals, like Saturnalia, brought opportunities. Lucius sold decorative pots for gifts, bartering for wine to share with Flavia. Taxes to the emperor were a burden, paid in coin or pots, and Lucius kept careful tallies on wax tablets. A rival potter, Gaius, undercut his prices, forcing Lucius to innovate, etching intricate patterns to attract wealthier clients. He prayed daily to the Lares, household gods, for protection against fire or theft, common threats in Rome's crowded streets. Personal life was secondary to work. Romance was not the grand passion of poets, but a steady bond. Lucius and Flavia shared quiet evenings, laughing over market gossip or planning for a child. Intimacy was a private ritual, a moment of closeness in a life of labor, always within the bounds of decorum. Lucius admired Flavia's thrift, her ability to turn a single denarius into a week's meals. One winter, a kiln fire failed, ruining a batch of amphorae. Lucius worked extra hours, shaping pots by lamplight, while Flavia sold bread to cover their rent. Their partnership held firm, their love a quiet strength against Rome's chaos. As years passed, Lucius's reputation grew. A merchant commissioned 100 amphorae, a windfall that bought a new kiln. He dreamed of a larger workshop, perhaps near the port of Ostia, but survival came first. At night, he and Flavia sat by their brazier, the city's hum fading, their hands clasped as they spoke of the future. Lucius's life was clay and fire, his craft a testament to his skill and the love that sustained him in Rome's endless grind. The Geisha's rivalry. In the winter of 1850, the city of Kanazawa, nestled between the Sea of Japan and the snow-capped mountains, hummed with the quiet elegance of its tea-houses. Tomo, a geisha of 26, glided through the Higashi-Chiya district, her silk kimono a splash of crimson against the snow. As a member of the Sakura Okiya, Tomo's life was a delicate dance of artistry and ambition, her survival hinging on her ability to outshine her rivals in dance, music, and wit. In Kanazawa's competitive geisha world, where every performance was a battle for patrons' favor, Tomo's days were spent perfecting her craft, her nights entertaining wealthy merchants and samurai, and her heart carefully guarded against the rumors that could ruin her. Tomo's journey began at 12, when her family, impoverished fishermen from a coastal village, sold her to the Okiya to settle debts. The Sakura Okiya, run by the formidable Madame Reiko, was a crucible of discipline. Tomo's early years were grueling. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings biting her fingers until they calloused. She learned the Kanazawa Odori, a dance of flowing movements inspired by the Asano River, and she studied calligraphy, her brush strokes capturing the elegance of waka poetry. Her wit, sharpened through years of observing patrons, was her greatest asset, allowing her to charm without crossing the boundaries of her role. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, but in Kanazawa, rivalries among geishas were fierce, each vying for the patronage that ensured survival. Survival in the Okiya was a constant struggle. Tomo's debts, to Madame Reiko for her training, kimonos, and meals, were a heavy burden. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a crane, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 3 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso, and pickled plums, unless a patron sent fish or mochi. Winter was harsh. The Okia's wooden walls drafty, and Tomo learned to mend her kimonos, stitching lotus patterns to hide wear. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution in Kanazawa's unforgiving streets. Tomo's rival, Ayaka, a geisha known for her kodo skills, was a constant threat, her performances drawing wealthy clients Tomo needed to secure. Tomo's days began before dawn, the air sharp with frost. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup, white oshiroy paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with silver pins that caught the lantern light. Her kimono, a deep crimson with gold-embroidered waves, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, bartering calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Her mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked snow falling on the Sai River, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Higashichaya tea house was Tomo's stage, its sliding doors painted with cherry blossoms and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for merchants, samurai, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of love and loss. Her Kanazawa odori captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. But Ayaka's presence loomed. At one banquet, Ayaka's kodo performance drew louder applause, and Tomo felt the sting of envy. She countered with a witty poem about fleeting snow, earning a merchant's laughter and a generous tip. Competition drove her to innovate. She composed new songs, blending traditional melodies with Kanazawa's folk tunes, and practiced late into the night, her fingers raw but her resolve unbroken. Tomo's personal life was a closely guarded secret. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the Okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Rumors swirled about her and a poet named Hiroshi, a frequent guest at the tea house. His verses, left on rice paper after banquets, praised her grace, and their conversations over sake grew warm with shared love for poetry. But Tomo denied any attachment, knowing love could derail her career. She deflected Hiroshi's advances with playful banter, keeping their bond intellectual. In private, she wrote her own poems, hidden beneath her futon, her heart's rebellion against the Okiya's rules. Intimacy, even in the rare case of a dana, was a discreet matter, and Tomo had no patron, preferring her independence. One evening, a wealthy merchant, Lord Tanaka, requested a private performance. Tomo played the shamisen, her voice singing of Kanazawa's rivers, and poured sake with practiced grace. Tanaka offered to become her dana, promising to ease her debts. The proposal was tempting. His wealth could secure her future, but Tomo hesitated, fearing a loss of autonomy. She declined politely, citing her dedication to her art, and left with a generous tip but no commitment. Madame Reiko, displeased, increased Tomo's performances, her workload a silent punishment. Exhaustion set in, but Tomo endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. As spring approached, Tomo prepared for the Kanazawa festival, where her performance could outshine Ayaka's. She practiced tirelessly, her dance a vision of cherry blossoms. The festival brought crowds, and Tomo's performance drew applause, her coins filling a lacquered box. Back at the Okiya, she counted her earnings, a fraction hers after Madame Reiko's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Sai River lulling her, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps opening a tea house where she could write poetry freely. For now, she was Kanazawa's star, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse battling the rivalry that defined her world. The Chinese scholar's solitude. In the autumn of 100 CE, in the Han Dynasty city of Luoyang, Wei, a scholar of 28, sat in a modest study lit by a single oil lamp, his brush poised over a bamboo scroll. The capital hummed with the clatter of carts and the chants of Buddhist monks, but Wei's world was one of Confucian texts and imperial ambitions. His life was a solitary pursuit of knowledge, his survival hinging on passing the imperial examinations to secure a bureaucratic post. In a society where scholarship was a path to status, Wei's days were filled with study, his nights with dreams of honor, and his personal life a distant hope, sacrificed to the demands of duty and family expectation. Wei's journey began in a rural village near the Yellow River, where his father, a minor official, taught him to read Confucian classics at 6. By 12, he was copying the Analects on bamboo strips, his fingers stained with ink. At 18, he moved to Luoyang, enrolling in a private academy to prepare for the exams, a grueling test of memory and moral reasoning. Success meant a post in the Han bureaucracy, with a salary of grain and silk. Failure meant returning to his village in disgrace. Wei's study was a small room in a boarding house, its walls lined with scrolls and its floor covered with reed mats. He lived frugally, his meals rice porridge and pickled cabbage, supplemented by vegetables from a small garden he tended. Survival demanded discipline. Wei rose at dawn, the air cool with autumn mist. He lit his lamp, its flicker casting shadows on the Analects and Mencius's teachings. He memorized passages, reciting them aloud to fix them in his mind, his voice echoing in the quiet room. By morning, he attended the academy, where masterly drilled students on Confucian ethics and Han laws. Wei's brush moved swiftly, copying texts or drafting essays on governance. Afternoons were spent practicing calligraphy, his strokes precise to impress examiners. Evenings brought more study, his eyes straining in the dim light. He bartered extra scrolls for ink or oil, his budget tight, and mended his hemp robe to save coin. Luoyang's bustle was a distraction Wei avoided. The markets, with their silk merchants and spice traders, tempted him, but he stayed in his study, knowing time was his currency. He joined other scholars at the academy's debates, arguing the merits of benevolence versus law, his voice steady despite his nerves. Failure in the exams could mean years of waiting, and Wei felt the weight of his family's hopes. His father sent letters, urging diligence, and Wei wrote back, promising success. He prayed to Confucius at a small shrine in his room, offering rice to seek wisdom. His only indulgence was poetry, scribbled on scrap bamboo, its verses about the Yellow River a quiet rebellion against his rigid routine. Personal life was a luxury Wei could not afford. Marriage, arranged by his family, was planned for after the exams, a practical union to a scholar's daughter from his village. Romance was a distant concept. Confucian duty emphasized family and state, not love. Wei had no betrothed yet, and his solitude was both a burden and a focus. He heard of scholars visiting courtesans in Luoyang's pleasure district, but Wei avoided such distractions, fearing they would derail his studies. His only connection was with a fellow scholar, Liang, who shared his boarding house. Their evenings were spent discussing philosophy, their debates a rare warmth in Wei's isolated life. Intimacy, even in friendship, was restrained, as Han custom valued decorum. One autumn, a plague swept Luoyang, and the academy closed briefly. Wei stayed in his room, copying texts to earn grain from a local scribe. He tended his garden, harvesting turnips to stretch his rations, and helped Liang repair their roof, bartering labor for companionship. The exams loomed, and Wei's anxiety grew. He practiced essays, his brush trembling, and memorized more texts, his mind a labyrinth of Confucian maxims. A letter from his father arrived, urging him to succeed for the family's honor. Wei felt the pressure, his dreams filled with visions of failure. Yet, he persevered, his lamp burning late, his poetry a quiet outlet for his fears. As the exam date approached, Wei prepared meticulously, polishing his calligraphy and rehearsing answers. The test, held in a vast hall, was a marathon of writing and recitation, his fate in the hands of imperial examiners. He left exhausted but hopeful, his scrolls submitted with care. Back in his study, he waited for results, tending his garden and writing poetry about Luoyang's autumn leaves. He dreamed of a post in the capital, perhaps as a clerk, with a home for his future wife. For now, Wei was a scholar, his life a solitary quest for knowledge, his heart a quiet verse waiting for the day duty would allow it to bloom. The Geisha's debt repayment. In the vibrant city of Edo in 1760, where the Sumida River wound past bustling markets and lantern-lit tea-houses, Yoshino, a geisha of 23, navigated the glittering yet unforgiving world of the Yoshiwara pleasure district. Her life in the Asahi Okiya was a delicate balance of artistry and obligation. Her days spent perfecting her craft, and her nights entertaining wealthy merchants and samurai to repay the towering debts incurred for her training. Survival demanded charm, skill, and sacrifice, as every kimono, every hairpin, and every bowl of rice bound her to the Okiya. Yoshino's personal life was tightly controlled, her heart a guarded secret in a world where romance could spell ruin. Yoshino's journey began at 13, when her family, impoverished weavers from a village near Edo, sold her to the Okiya to escape starvation. The Asahi Okiya, run by the stern Madame Chiyo, was a place of beauty and discipline. Yoshino's early years were relentless. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings leaving her fingers raw. She learned the tsum no mai, a dance mimicking the grace of cranes, its steps demanding precision, and she studied calligraphy, her brush strokes capturing the elegance of waka poetry. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her shield, allowing her to entertain without crossing the boundaries of her role. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though Yoshiwara's patrons often blurred the line. Survival was a daily struggle. Yoshino's debts, to Madame Chiyo for her kimonos, lessons, and meals, were a heavy yoke. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a cherry blossom, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 4 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso soup, and pickled radish, unless a patron sent fish or mochi. Winter brought cold, the Okiya's wooden walls drafty, and Yoshino learned to mend her kimonos, stitching lotus patterns to hide wear. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution or worse in Yoshiwara's harsh streets. Yoshino's only path to freedom was through consistent earnings, a goal that seemed distant under Madame Chiyo's watchful eye. Yoshino's days began before dawn, the air sharp with the scent of cedar. She bathed in a wooden tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup: white ashiroi paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with jade pins that glinted in the lantern light. Her kimono, a deep indigo with silver-embroidered waves, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, bartering calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Her mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling snow, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Asahi Tea House was Yoshino's stage, its sliding doors painted with plum blossoms and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for merchants, samurai, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of love and loss. Her tsum no mai captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. She poured sake with practiced grace, her conversation sparkling with tales of Edo's history and witty jests. Her charm earned generous tips, but Madame Chiyo claimed the lion's share, leaving Yoshino with a fraction to chip away at her debts. She learned to negotiate with patrons, offering extra songs or poems for coins, her smile a mask for her exhaustion. Yoshino's personal life was a forbidden realm. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the Okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements, if discovered, could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Whispers linked her to a samurai named Kinzo, a frequent guest whose quiet demeanor and love for poetry drew her attention. Their conversations over sake were warm, filled with shared admiration for Basho's haikus, but Yoshino kept her distance, knowing love could derail her career. She deflected his advances with playful banter, keeping their bond intellectual. In private, she wrote poems about the Sumida River, hidden beneath her futon, her heart's rebellion against the Okiya's rules. Intimacy, even in the rare case of Adana, was a discreet matter, and Yoshino had no patron, preferring her independence despite the financial strain. One evening, a wealthy merchant, Lord Saito, requested a private performance. Yoshino played the shamisen, her voice singing of Edo's cherry blossoms, and served tea with flawless etiquette. Saito offered to become her Dana, promising to ease her debts. The proposal was a lifeline. His wealth could shorten her servitude, but Yoshino hesitated, fearing a loss of autonomy. She declined politely, citing her dedication to her art, and left with a generous tip but no commitment. Madame Chiyo, displeased, increased Yoshino's performances, her workload a silent punishment. Exhaustion set in, but Yoshino endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. As spring approached, Yoshino prepared for the Sanja Matsuri, where her performance could draw crowds and coins. She practiced tirelessly, her dance a vision of cranes in flight. The festival brought pilgrims, and Yoshino's performance earned applause, her coins filling a lacquered box. Back at the Okiya, she counted her earnings, a fraction hers after Madame Chiyo's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Sumida River lulling her, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps opening a tea house where she could write poetry freely. For now, she was Yoshiwara's star, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse battling the debts that bound her. The Viking trader's journey. In the rugged fjords of 9th century Scandinavia, in the year 860, Bjorn, a Viking trader of 34, stood on the deck of his longship, the Sea Raven, as it cut through the icy waters of the Baltic Sea. His life was one of adventure and risk, his survival tied to the trade routes that stretched from Birka to distant markets in Francia and Byzantium. Bjorn bartered furs, amber, and iron for silver, silk, and spices, his wealth sustaining his family and village. At home in a coastal settlement near modern-day Uppsala, his wife, Astrid, managed their farm, her strength a cornerstone of their life. Their marriage was a partnership forged in hardship, their personal life a private bond strengthened by long separations and the harsh demands of Norse survival. Bjorn's path as a trader began at 16, when he joined his father's voyages, learning to navigate by stars and read the sea's moods. By 25, he captained the Sea Raven, a sleek vessel with a dragon-carved prow, its oak planks weathered by storms. His village, a cluster of longhouses with sod roofs, relied on his trade to bring tools and coin. Bjorn's life was split between sea and shore, months sailing treacherous waters, weeks at home tending crops and livestock. Survival demanded skill, courage, and luck, as storms, pirates, or failed trades could ruin him. Astrid, married to Bjorn at 20, was his equal, her hands calloused from plowing fields and weaving wool. Their bond, rooted in necessity, grew into quiet affection. Bjorn's journeys began in spring, when the ice melted. He rose at dawn, the air sharp with salt and pine, to load the Sea Raven with furs, bear, fox, and seal, gathered by his village's hunters. Amber, polished to a warm glow, and iron ingots filled the hold, each item a gamble for profit. His crew, 10 men from his village, rode in rhythm, their songs echoing over the waves. Bjorn navigated by sun and stars, his eyes scanning for reefs or raiders. The Baltic was perilous, its storms sudden, and Bjorn prayed to Njord, god of the sea, offering mead at a shipboard shrine. In Hedeby, a bustling trade hub, he bartered furs for Frankish swords and glass beads, his voice firm as he haggled with merchants. Failure meant returning empty-handed, a blow to his village's survival. At home, Astrid was the heart of their farm. She plowed barley fields, milked goats, and wove wool into cloaks sold at local markets. Their longhouse, with its smoky hearth and carved beams, was home to their 2 daughters, Freya and Sigrid, who helped with chores. Meals were barley porridge, smoked fish, and ale, supplemented by wild berries Astrid gathered. She bartered wool for salt or iron, her thrift ensuring their stores lasted through winter. The village was a community. Neighbors shared tools, rebuilt storm-damaged roofs, and celebrated festivals like the Midsummer Blot, offering goats to Thor for prosperity. Astrid's strength held the farm together during Bjorn's absences, her letters, carved on wood by a village skald, carrying news to him in distant ports. Survival required resilience. Bjorn faced storms that nearly sank the Sea Raven, his crew bailing water as waves crashed. In Novgorod, a trade went sour, and he lost half his furs to a cunning merchant. He learned to negotiate harder, offering amber jewelry to secure silver dirhams. At home, Astrid battled a harsh winter, her crops failing, forcing her to trade cloaks for grain. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond in quiet moments, a shared horn of ale by the hearth, a laugh over their daughter's games. Norse custom valued restraint, and their affection was expressed in actions, Bjorn carving a comb for Astrid, she weaving a cloak for his voyages. Physical closeness was a comfort after long separations, always within the bounds of their practical life. One summer, Bjorn sailed to Byzantium, a month-long journey to the glittering markets of Constantinople. He traded furs for silk and spices, his profits buying a bronze arm ring for Astrid. The voyage was fraught. Pirates attacked near Gotland, and Bjorn's axe saw use before they escaped. Back home, Astrid faced a wolf preying on their goats, organizing the village to hunt it. Their reunion was joyful, marked by a feast of roasted boar and tales of their trials. Bjorn dreamed of a larger longship, perhaps trading as far as Baghdad, but survival came first. He repaired the Sea Raven, its hull patched with pine tar, and helped Astrid sow barley, their hands working as one. As years passed, Bjorn's reputation grew. His village prospered, their longhouse expanded with a new room for Freya and Sigrid. At night, Bjorn and Astrid sat by the hearth, the fjord's waves a distant song, their bond a steady flame in a life of risk and toil. Bjorn's world was sea and trade, his life a testament to courage and the love that anchored him to shore. The Geisha's seasonal wardrobe. In the autumn of 1875, the Gion district of Kyoto glowed with the fiery hues of maple leaves, their brilliance mirrored in the lantern-lit streets where geishas moved like apparitions. Sakura, a geisha of 25, was a star of the Miyagawa Okiya, her life a delicate tapestry of artistry and obligation. Her survival depended on her appearance, as wealthy patrons favored elegance, and her seasonal kimonos were her armor in the competitive world of Gion. Each silken garment, each kanzashi hairpin, was a debt to the Okiya, and Sakura's days were spent ensuring her wardrobe captivated, her nights entertaining merchants and samurai. Her personal life was a forbidden realm, her heart guarded against the romantic ties that could jeopardize her standing. Sakura's journey began at 11, when her family, rice farmers from a drought-stricken village near Osaka, sold her to the Okiya to survive. The Miyagawa Okiya, under the stern Madame Noriko, was a crucible of discipline. Sakura's early years were grueling. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings biting her fingers until they calloused. She mastered the Aki no Mai, a dance mimicking falling leaves, its steps demanding grace, and she studied calligraphy, her brush strokes capturing the melancholy of waka poetry. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her shield, allowing her to charm without crossing boundaries. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though Gion's patrons often misunderstood her role. Survival hinged on appearances. Sakura's debts, to Madame Noriko for her training, kimonos, and meals, were a constant burden. Each seasonal kimono, from spring's pastel cherry blossoms to autumn's deep reds, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 3 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso soup, and pickled bamboo shoots, unless a patron sent fish or sweets. Autumn was a busy season, but winter loomed when patrons retreated and earnings dwindled. Sakura learned to mend her kimonos, stitching maple leaf patterns to hideware, and bartered calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution in Kyoto's unforgiving streets. Sakura's days began before dawn, the air crisp with autumn chill. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup: white ashiroi paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with gold pins shaped like maple leaves, their glint catching the lantern light. Her kimono, a rich scarlet with silver-embroidered chrysanthemums, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, her budget stretched thin. Mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling leaves, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Miyagawa tea house was Sakura's stage, its sliding doors painted with autumn scenes, and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for merchants, samurai, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of fleeting beauty. Her Aki no Mai captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. She poured sake with practiced grace, her conversation sparkling with tales of Kyoto's temples and witty jests. Her charm earned generous tips, but Madame Noriko claimed the lion's share, leaving Sakura with a fraction to chip away at her debts. She learned to negotiate with patrons, offering extra songs or poems for coins, her smile a mask for her exhaustion. Sakura's personal life was tightly controlled. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the Okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Whispers linked her to a scholar named Tetsuo, a frequent guest whose love for poetry matched her own. Their conversations over sake were warm, filled with shared admiration for Ono no Kamachi's verses, but Sakura kept her distance, knowing love could derail her career. She deflected his advances with playful banter, keeping their bond intellectual. In private, she wrote poems about Gion's maples, hidden beneath her futon, her heart's rebellion against the Okiya's rules. Intimacy, even in the rare case of Adana, was a discreet matter, and Sakura had no patron, preferring her independence despite the financial strain. One evening, a wealthy merchant, Lord Hayashi, requested a private performance. Sakura played the shamisen, her voice singing of autumn's fleeting colors, and served tea with flawless etiquette. Hayashi offered to become her Dana, promising to ease her debts. The proposal was tempting. His wealth could shorten her servitude, but Sakura hesitated, fearing a loss of autonomy. She declined politely, citing her dedication to her art, and left with a generous tip but no commitment. Madame Noriko, displeased, increased Sakura's performances, her workload a silent punishment. Exhaustion set in, but Sakura endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. As winter approached, Sakura prepared for the Giono Dori, a grand performance where her dance could draw crowds and coins. She practiced tirelessly, her Aki no Mai a vision of falling leaves. The event brought pilgrims, and Sakura's performance earned applause, her coins filling a lacquered box. Back at the Okiya, she counted her earnings, a fraction hers after Madame Noriko's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Kamo River lulling her, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps opening a tea house where she could write poetry freely. For now, she was Gion's star, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse battling the wardrobe that defined her. The Indus Valley Potter. In the bustling city of Harappa in 2500 BCE, where the Ravi River nourished fields of wheat and barley, Priya, a potter of 28, worked in a sunlit courtyard, her hands shaping clay into vessels for grain storage. Her life was one of craft and community, her survival tied to the kilns that glowed in her workshop and the market where she bartered her pots. Harappa's streets buzzed with traders and artisans, and Priya's intricate designs were prized by merchants and households alike. Her husband, Anil, a farmer, toiled in nearby fields, their marriage a partnership rooted in necessity and warmed by affection. Their personal life was a private bond, overshadowed by the demands of labor and the rhythms of the Indus Valley's thriving civilization. Priya's craft was her inheritance. Born to a potter's family in Harappa's artisans' quarter, she learned to knead clay and fire pots as a girl, her fingers guided by her mother's skilled hands. By 18, she was crafting vessels, bowls, jars, and storage urns, marked with geometric patterns that echoed Harappa's seals. Her workshop, a mud brick space with a thatched roof, was filled with the earthy scent of clay and the heat of a brick kiln. Her pots held grain, oil, or water, essential to Harappa's trade and daily life. Survival depended on her skill, as a failed firing or cracked pot meant lost income in a city where competition among artisans was fierce. Priya's days began at dawn, the air cool with river mist. She fetched clay from the Ravi's banks, mixing it with water and sand to achieve the perfect texture. Her wheel, a simple stone disc, spun under her hands, shaping jars with swift precision, each vessel balanced and sturdy. By noon, she loaded the kiln, praying to the fire deity for a flawless firing, her eyes scanning for cracks as the pots hardened. Afternoons were spent painting designs, spirals, fish, and peacock motifs, using ochre and charcoal slips. She bartered surplus pots at Harappa's market, trading for wheat, lentils, or cotton cloth, her voice steady as she haggled with traders. Evenings brought repairs, patching the kiln, grinding pigments. Before she returned home, her tunic stained with clay. Anil was her anchor. Married at 20, their union was arranged by their families, but love grew through shared labor. Anil plowed fields of barley and cotton, his harvests feeding their family and filling Harappa's granaries. Their home, a mud brick house with a courtyard and reed mats, was shared with their son, Ravi, who played with clay scraps. Meals were simple: flatbread, lentil stew, and dates, supplemented by fish when Anil's crops earned extra. Priya's pots were used in their own kitchen, her pride evident in their durability. They bartered Anil's surplus grain for oil or beads, their thrift ensuring their stores lasted through the monsoon. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond in quiet moments, a shared meal, a laugh over Ravi's antics. Indus Valley custom valued modesty, and their affection was expressed in actions. Priya crafting a bowl for Anil, he bringing her river reeds for kindling. Survival required community. Priya worked alongside other potters, sharing clay pits and kiln space, their laughter a respite from toil. Anil joined farmers to maintain irrigation channels, their labor coordinated by city elders. They celebrated festivals, offering pots and grain to deities at Harappa's shrines, their dances under torchlight a communal joy. Priya's pots were traded as far as Mohenjo-daro, her designs earning her a reputation. She kept tallies on clay tablets, marking sales with simple scratches, though a scribe recorded larger trades. Taxes, paid in grain or pots, were a burden, and Priya prayed daily to avoid the elders' scrutiny. One summer, a flood threatened Harappa's fields. Anil worked tirelessly, reinforcing canals, while Priya fired extra pots to store grain safely. The community rallied, sharing food and tools, their survival collective. Priya's hands ached from shaping clay, but her pots saved harvests, earning her extra barley from grateful neighbors. At night, she and Anil sat by their hearth, Ravi asleep, and spoke of the future, more kills, perhaps a larger home. Their intimacy was a quiet comfort, a moment of closeness in a life of labor, always within the bounds of custom. Priya dreamed of crafting finer pots, perhaps for priests, but survival came first. She repaired her wheel, its stone worn smooth, and helped Anil sow wheat, their hands working as one. As years passed, Priya's reputation grew. A merchant commissioned 100 jars, a windfall that bought a new kiln. She taught Ravi to shape clay, his small hands mimicking hers. At night, Priya and Anil sat by the Ravi River, the city's hum fading, their bond a steady flame in a life of craft and toil. Priya's world was clay and fire, her life a testament to her skill and the love that sustained her in Harappa's bustling heart. The Geisha's patron negotiation. In the spring of 1865, the Gion district of Kyoto bloomed with cherry blossoms, their petals drifting through the narrow streets where lanterns cast a soft glow. Natsum, a geisha of 27, was a luminary of the Kisaragi Okiya, her life a delicate balance of artistry and strategy. Her survival depended on securing the patronage of wealthy clients, whose support could ease the crushing debts she owed for her training and wardrobe. In a world where charm and autonomy were in constant tension, Natsum's days were spent perfecting her craft, her nights entertaining merchants and samurai, and her personal life carefully guarded against the romantic entanglements that could ruin her standing. Tonight, she faced a pivotal moment, a negotiation with a potential Dana, a patron whose wealth could change her future, but whose expectations demanded careful navigation. Natsum's journey began at 12, when her family, silk merchants fallen on hard times in a village near Kyoto, sold her to the Okiya to settle debts. The Kisaragi Okiya, under the iron rule of Madame Fumiko, was a world of discipline and elegance. Natsum's early years were relentless. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings leaving her fingers raw. She mastered the Haru no Mai, a dance mimicking spring's awakening, its steps requiring precision, and she studied the tea ceremony, her hands steady as she whisked matcha. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her greatest asset, allowing her to charm without crossing boundaries. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though Gion's patrons often blurred the line. Survival was a daily negotiation. Natsume's debts, to Madame Fumiko for her kimonos, lessons, and meals, were a heavy burden. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a cherry blossom, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 3 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso soup, and pickled plums, unless a patron sent fish or mochi. Spring was a prosperous season, with banquets aplenty, but winter loomed, when patrons retreated and earnings dwindled. Natsume learned to mend her kimonos, stitching sakura patterns to hideware, and bartered calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution in Kyoto's unforgiving streets. Natsume's days began before dawn, the air fragrant with cherry blossoms. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup: white ashiroi paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with silver pins that caught the lantern light. Her kimono, a pale pink with gold-embroidered waves, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, her budget stretched thin. Mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling petals, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Kisaragi tea house was Natsume's stage, its sliding doors painted with spring scenes and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for merchants, samurai, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of love and renewal. Her Haru no Mai captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. She poured sake with practiced grace, her conversation sparkling with tales of Kyoto's shrines and witty jests. Her charm earned generous tips, but Madame Fumiko claimed the lion's share, leaving Natsume with a fraction to chip away at her debts. She learned to negotiate with patrons, offering extra songs or poems for coins, her smile a mask for her exhaustion. Natsume's personal life was a forbidden realm. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Whispers linked her to a poet named Daichi, a frequent guest whose verses praised her grace. Their conversations over sake were warm, filled with shared admiration for Basho's haikus, but Natsume kept her distance, knowing love could derail her career. She deflected his advances with playful banter, keeping their bond intellectual. In private, she wrote poems about Gion's cherry blossoms, hidden beneath her futon, her heart's rebellion against the okiya's rules. Intimacy, even in the rare case of a dana, was a discreet matter, and Natsume had no patron, preferring her independence despite the financial strain. One evening, a wealthy merchant, Lord Nakamura, requested a private performance to discuss becoming her dana. Natsume arrived at the tea house, her kimono a vision of spring, and played the shamisen, her voice singing of cherry blossoms. She served tea with flawless etiquette, her conversation weaving tales of Kyoto's history. Nakamura, a widower in his 50s, offered generous support, enough to have her debts, but hinted at expectations of exclusive companionship. The proposal was a lifeline, but Natsume feared losing her autonomy. Adana's relationship was professional, focused on artistry, though rumors of deeper ties persisted in Gion. She negotiated carefully, agreeing to regular performances but setting boundaries to protect her independence. Nakamura accepted, his payments easing her burden, but their bond remained formal, with no intimacy beyond conversation. Madame Fumiko, pleased with the arrangement, eased Natsume's workload, but the pressure to maintain Nakamura's favor was constant. Natsume practiced tirelessly, her Haru no Mai a vision of spring's renewal. She performed at the Gion Matsuri, her dance drawing crowds and coins, her earnings a step toward freedom. Back at the Okia, she counted her coins, a fraction hers after Madame Fumiko's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Kamo River lulling her, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps opening a tea-house where she could write poetry freely. For now, she was Gion's star, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse navigating the delicate balance of patronage and autonomy. The Mayan weaver's craft. In the lush jungles of Tikal in 600 CE, where the cries of howler monkeys echoed and limestone pyramids pierced the canopy, Ixchel, a weaver of 26, worked in a thatched courtyard, her loom strung with vibrant threads of cotton and maguey. Her life was one of craft and devotion, her survival tied to the textiles she wove for nobles and the market where she bartered them for maize and jade. Tikal's bustling city thrived on trade and ritual, and Ixchel's intricate patterns were prized by priests and merchants. Her husband, Kinich, a maize farmer, toiled in nearby fields, their marriage a partnership rooted in necessity and warmed by shared faith. Their personal life was a private bond, overshadowed by the demands of labor and the rituals that defined Mayan life. Ixchel's craft was her heritage. Born to a weaver's family in Tikal's artisans' quarter, she learned to spin cotton and dye threads as a girl, her mother teaching her patterns of jaguars and stars. By 16, she was crafting textiles, cloaks, hupils, and ceremonial sashes, adorned with designs that honored the gods. Her workshop, a thatched hut with a clay floor, was filled with the scent of dye and the hum of her backstrap loom. Her textiles clothed nobles and adorned altars, essential to Tikal's rituals and trade. Survival depended on her skill, as a flawed weave or failed sale could mean hunger in a city where competition among artisans was fierce. Ixchel's days began at dawn, the air heavy with jungle mist. She gathered cotton from the market, spinning it into thread with a spindle whirl. Her loom, tied to a tree in her waist, was her canvas, her hands weaving intricate patterns of red, blue, and yellow, dyed with indigo and cochineal. By noon, she checked her dyes, simmering pots of bark and insects, praying to Nine-Shell, goddess of weaving, for vibrant colors. Afternoons were spent at Tikal's market, bartering textiles for maize, beans, or cacao, her voice steady as she negotiated with traders. Evenings brought repairs, restringing her loom, sharpening bone needles. Before she returned home, her tunic stained with dye. Kinich was her anchor. Married at 18, their union was arranged by their families, but love grew through shared labor. Kinich tended maize fields, his harvests feeding their family and filling Tikal's granaries. Their home, a thatched house with a clay hearth, was shared with their daughter, Yatzel, who played with spindles. Meals were simple: maize tortillas, bean stew, and tamales, supplemented by mangoes when Kinich's crops earned extra. Ixchel's textiles were used in their own home, her pride evident in their durability. They bartered Kinich's surplus maize for salt or feathers, their thrift ensuring their stores lasted through the dry season. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond in quiet moments, a shared meal, a laugh over Yatzel's games. Mayan custom valued modesty, and their affection was expressed in actions. Ixchel weaving a sash for Kinich, he bringing her cacao pods. Survival required community. Ixchel worked alongside other weavers, sharing dyes and patterns, their laughter a respite from toil. Kinich joined farmers to maintain irrigation channels, their labor coordinated by priests. They celebrated festivals, like the maize harvest, offering textiles and corn to the gods at Tikal's pyramids, their dances under torchlight a communal joy. Ixchel's textiles were traded as far as Köpen, her designs earning her a reputation. She kept tallies on bark paper, marking sales with simple glyphs, though a scribe recorded larger trades. Offerings to the gods, in maize or cloth, were a burden, and Ixchel prayed daily to avoid the priest's scrutiny. One dry season, a drought threatened Tikal's fields. Kinich worked tirelessly, diverting water from canals, while Ixchel wove extra textiles to barter for maize. The community rallied, sharing food and tools, their survival collective. Ixchel's hands ached from weaving, but her textiles saved their stores, earning her extra cacao from grateful neighbors. At night, she and Kinich sat by their hearth, Yatsel asleep, and spoke of the future, more looms, perhaps a larger home. Their intimacy was a quiet comfort, a moment of closeness in a life of labor, always within the bounds of custom. Ixchel dreamed of crafting textiles for the king, but survival came first. She repaired her loom, its wood worn smooth, and helped Kinich sow maize, their hands working as one. As years passed, Ixchel's reputation grew. A noble commissioned a ceremonial cloak, a windfall that bought a new loom. She taught Yatsel to weave, her small hands mimicking hers. At night, Ixchel and Kinich sat by the jungle's edge, Tikal's pyramids looming, their bond a steady flame in a life of craft and toil. Ixchel's world was thread and dye, her life a testament to her skill and the love that sustained her in Tikal's vibrant heart. The Geisha's secret poetry. In the vibrant city of Osaka in 1685, where the Yodo River glimmered under lantern light, and the air carried the scent of grilled fish and cherry blossoms, Ayam, a geisha of 24, moved through the Dotonbori district with the grace of a willow in the wind. Her life in the Hanami Okiya was a delicate balance of artistry and restraint, her days spent perfecting her craft and her nights entertaining samurai and merchants in opulent tea-houses. Ayam's survival depended on her ability to captivate, but her heart found solace in secret poetry, a private rebellion against the rigid expectations of her world. Her connection with a scholar named Jiro, intellectual and forbidden, was a thread of light in her constrained existence, though she guarded it fiercely to protect her career. Ayam's journey began at 10, when her family, impoverished sake brewers from a village near Osaka, sold her to the Okiya to survive a famine. The Hanami Okiya, under the stern Madame Yuki, was a world of discipline and elegance. Ayam's early years were relentless. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings leaving her fingers raw. She mastered the human no mai, a dance mimicking plum blossoms, its steps demanding precision, and she studied calligraphy, her brush strokes capturing the elegance of waka poetry. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her shield, allowing her to charm without crossing boundaries. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though Osaka's patrons often blurred the line. Survival was a daily struggle. Ayam's debts, to Madame Yuki for her kimonos, lessons, and meals, were a heavy burden. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a crane, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 3 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso soup, and pickled radish, unless a patron sent fish or mochi. Spring was a prosperous season, with banquets aplenty, but winter loomed, when patrons retreated and earnings dwindled. Ayam learned to mend her kimonos, stitching plum blossom patterns to hideware, and bartered calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution in Osaka's unforgiving streets. Ayam's days began before dawn, the air fragrant with river mist. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup: white ashiroi paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with silver pins that caught the lantern light. Her kimono, a deep green with gold-embroidered waves, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, her budget stretched thin. Mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling petals, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Hanami Tea House was Ayam's stage, its sliding doors painted with cherry blossoms and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for samurai, merchants, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of love and loss. Her human no mai captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. She poured sake with practiced grace, her conversation sparkling with tales of Osaka's canals and witty jests. Her charm earned generous tips, but Madame Yuki claimed the lion's share, leaving Ayam with a fraction to chip away at her debts. She learned to negotiate with patrons, offering extra songs or poems for coins, her smile a mask for her exhaustion. Iam's personal life was a forbidden realm, her heart finding expression only in secret poetry. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the Okia and their art. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Her connection with Jiro, a scholar who frequented the tea house, was a quiet rebellion. Their conversations over sake were warm, filled with shared admiration for Seijio's verses, and Jiro gifted her a scroll of poetry, a dangerous gesture she hid beneath her futon. Their bond was intellectual, never physical, as Iam knew love could derail her career. She deflected his deeper sentiments with playful banter, keeping their relationship a meeting of minds. In private, she wrote poems about the Yodo River's flow, their words a silent cry for freedom, hidden from Madame Yuki's scrutiny. Intimacy, even in the rare case of Adana, was a discreet matter, and Iam had no patron, preferring her independence despite the financial strain. One evening, a wealthy samurai, Lord Takeda, requested a private performance. Iam played the shamisen, her voice singing of spring's renewal, and served tea with flawless etiquette. Takeda offered to become her Dana, promising to ease her debts. The proposal was tempting. His wealth could shorten her servitude, but Iam hesitated, fearing a loss of autonomy. She declined politely, citing her dedication to her art, and left with a generous tip, but no commitment. Madame Yuki, displeased, increased Iam's performances, her workload a silent punishment. Exhaustion set in, but Iam endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. As autumn approached, Iam prepared for the Tenjin Matsuri, where her dance could draw crowds and coins. She practiced tirelessly, her human no-maya vision of plum blossoms. The festival brought pilgrims, and Iam's performance earned applause, her coins filling a lacquered box. Back at the Okia, she counted her earnings, a fraction hers after Madame Yuki's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Yodo River lulling her, and dreamed of a day when her debts would be paid, perhaps publishing her poetry under her own name. For now, she was Osaka's star, her life a performance, her heart a secret verse battling the constraints that bound her. The Greek fisherman's life. In the sun-drenched waters of the Aegean Sea in 450 BCE, where the islands of Attica shimmered under a cloudless sky, Nikos, a fisherman of 32, cast his nets from a weathered wooden boat off the coast of Athens. His life was one of toil and tide, his survival tied to the daily catch that fed his family and filled the stalls of the agora. Athens buzzed with philosophers, traders, and sailors, and Nikos's fish were prized by merchants and households alike. His wife, Chloe, mended nets and managed their modest home. Their marriage a partnership rooted in necessity and warmed by affection. Their personal life was a private bond, overshadowed by the demands of labor and the rhythms of Athenian life. Nikos's craft was his inheritance. Born to a fisherman's family in the port of Piraeus, he learned to sail and cast nets as a boy, his hands guided by his father's calloused fingers. By 20, he owned a small boat, its cedar planks patched with pitch, and fished the Aegean's rich waters, hauling sardines, mackerel, and octopus. His life was split. Zero split between sea and shore. Days battling waves, nights mending nets by oil lamp. Survival depended on skill and luck, as storms or poor catches could mean hunger. Chloe, married to Nikos at 22, was his equal, her hands deft at weaving nets and bartering fish. Their bond, forged in hardship, grew into quiet love. Nikos's days began before dawn, the air cool with sea mist. He rowed out from Piraeus, his boat bobbing on the waves, and cast nets woven from flax, praying to Poseidon for a bountiful catch. By noon, he hauled in the nets, his muscles straining under the weight of fish, their silver scales glinting in the sun. Afternoons were spent at the agora, bartering fish for barley, olives, or pottery, his voice hoarse from haggling. Evenings brought repairs, patching sails, sharpening hooks. Before he returned home, his tunic stiff with salt. Storms were a constant threat, and Nikos learned to read the sky, avoiding squalls that could sink his boat. He offered fish to the gods at a small seaside shrine, seeking protection for his journeys. Chloe was his anchor. Their home, a whitewashed stone house near the shore, was simple, a clay hearth, reed mats, and a wooden cradle for their son, Damon. Chloe mended nets, her fingers nimble, and sold surplus fish at the market, her thrift ensuring their stores lasted through lean times. Meals were modest: bread, fish stew, and wine, supplemented by figs when Nikos's catches earned extra. They bartered Chloe's nets for oil or cloth, their frugality a shield against Athens' rising prices. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond in quiet moments, a shared cup of wine, a laugh over Damon's toddling steps. Greek custom valued restraint, and their affection was expressed in actions. Nikos carving a toy boat for Damon, Chloe weaving a cloak for his voyages. Survival required community. Nikos fished alongside other sailors, sharing boats and tales, their laughter a respite from toil. Chloe joined women to weave and gossip, their hands moving in rhythm. They celebrated festivals, like the Panathenea, offering fish and nets to Athena's temple, their dances under torchlight a communal joy. Nikos's fish were traded as far as Corinth, his reputation earning him extra coin. He kept tallies on wax tablets, marking sales with scratches, though a scribe recorded larger trades. Taxes, paid in fish or coin, were a burden, and Nikos prayed to avoid the magistrate's scrutiny. One summer, a storm sank half his nets, threatening their livelihood. Nikos dove into the Aegean, salvaging what he could, while Chloe wove new nets by lamplight, her fingers bleeding. The community rallied, sharing fish and tools, their survival collective. Nikos's hands ached from rowing, but his catches saved their stores, earning him extra olives from grateful neighbors. At night, he and Chloe sat by the hearth, Damon asleep, and spoke of the future, a larger boat, perhaps a second child. Their intimacy was a quiet comfort, a moment of closeness in a life of labor, always within the bounds of custom. Nikos dreamed of sailing to Crete, but survival came first. He repaired his boat, its planks worn smooth, and helped Chloe dry fish, their hands working as one. As years passed, Nikos's reputation grew. A merchant commissioned 100 fish, a windfall that bought a new sail. He taught Damon to cast nets, his small hands mimicking his. At night, Nikos and Chloe sat by the sea, the waves lapping, their bond a steady flame in a life of tide and toil. Nikos's world was sea and net, his life a testament to his skill and the love that sustained him in Athens' bustling heart. The Geisha's retirement dream. In the autumn of 1880, the Gion district of Kyoto shimmered with the golden hues of ginkgo leaves, their delicate dance mirrored in the lantern-lit streets where geishas moved like visions of art. Reiko, a geisha of 29, was a luminary of the Tsukiji Okiya, her life a delicate balance of artistry and ambition. Her survival depended on pleasing patrons to repay the debts that bound her to the Okiya, but her heart was set on a dream: to save enough to open a tea house of her own, a rare path to freedom for a geisha. Her days were spent perfecting her craft, her nights entertaining merchants and samurai, and her personal life tightly guarded against the romantic entanglements that could derail her plans. In a world where every kimono and smile was a debt, Reiko's resolve was her shield, her dream a quiet fire burning beneath her polished exterior. Reiko's journey began at 13, when her family, impoverished potters from a village near Kyoto, sold her to the Okiya to survive a famine. The Tsukiji Okiya, under the formidable Madame Kaori, was a crucible of discipline. Reiko's early years were grueling. She woke at dawn to practice the shamisen, its strings biting her fingers until they calloused. She mastered the Gion no Mai, a dance mimicking the flow of the Kamo River, its steps demanding precision, and she studied calligraphy, her brush strokes capturing the elegance of waka poetry. Her wit, honed through years of observing patrons, was her greatest asset, allowing her to charm without crossing boundaries. A geisha was an artist, a companion of intellect, not a courtesan, though Gion's patrons often blurred the line. Survival was a daily struggle. Reiko's debts, to Madame Kaori for her kimonos, lessons, and meals, were a heavy yoke. Every silk obi, every kanzashi hairpin shaped like a ginkgo leaf, added to her ledger. She shared a tatami room with 3 other geishas, their futons rolled tightly to make space for practice. Meals were modest: rice, miso soup, and pickled bamboo shoots, unless a patron sent fish or mochi. Autumn was a prosperous season, with banquets aplenty, but winter loomed, when patrons retreated and earnings dwindled. Reiko learned to mend her kimonos, stitching autumnal patterns to hide wear, and bartered calligraphy for silk scraps to repair her obi. Failure to attract patrons could mean expulsion, a fate that led to destitution in Kyoto's unforgiving streets. Reiko's days began before dawn, the air crisp with autumn chill. She bathed in a cedar tub, scrubbing her skin with rice bran to achieve the flawless complexion expected of a geisha. An older geisha applied her makeup, white oshiroy paste, crimson lips, and kohl-accented eyes. Her hair, styled in the shimada of a full geisha, was adorned with gold pins that caught the lantern light. Her kimono, a deep amber with silver-embroidered waves, was a masterpiece, its weight a reminder of her debts. She spent hours with seamstresses, ensuring every fold was perfect, her budget stretched thin. Mornings were filled with dance practice, her fan tracing arcs that mimicked falling leaves, her steps precise despite aching muscles. The Tsukiji tea house was Reiko's stage, its sliding doors painted with ginkgo trees and its floors polished to a sheen. She performed for merchants, samurai, and poets, her shamisen melodies weaving tales of love and transience. Her Gion no Mai captivated audiences, her movements fluid as she spun, her fan a blur of silk. She poured sake with practiced grace, her conversation sparkling with tales of Kyoto's temples and witty jests. Her charm earned generous tips, which she saved meticulously, hiding coins in a lacquered box beneath her futon. Madame Kaori claimed the lion's share, but Reiko's frugality allowed her to squirrel away a fraction, each coin a step toward her tea house dream. Reiko's personal life was a forbidden realm. Geishas were expected to remain unattached, their loyalty to the okiya and their art. Romantic entanglements could ruin her reputation and anger patrons. Whispers linked her to a merchant named Takashi, a frequent guest whose quiet demeanor and love for poetry drew her attention. Their conversations over sake were warm, filled with shared admiration for Seijio's verses, but Reiko kept her distance, knowing love could derail her dream. She deflected his advances with playful banter, keeping their bond intellectual. In private, she wrote poems about Gion's autumn leaves, hidden beneath her futon, her heart's rebellion against the okiya's rules. Intimacy, even in the rare case of Adana, was a discreet matter, and Reiko had no patron, preferring her independence despite the financial strain. One evening, a wealthy samurai, Lord Mori, requested a private performance. Reiko played the shamisen, her voice singing of autumn's fleeting beauty, and served tea with flawless etiquette. Mori offered to become her dana, promising to ease her debts. The proposal was tempting. His wealth could hasten her freedom, but Reiko feared losing her autonomy and her focus on her tea house dream. She declined politely, citing her dedication to her art, and left with a generous tip but no commitment. Madame Kaori, displeased, increased Reiko's performances, her workload a silent punishment. Exhaustion set in, but Reiko endured, her shamisen a lifeline, her poetry a refuge. As winter approached, Reiko prepared for the Giono Dori, a grand performance where her dance could draw crowds and coins. She practiced tirelessly, her Gion no Mai a vision of rivers flow. The event brought pilgrims, and Reiko's performance earned applause, her coins filling a lacquered box. Back at the okiya, she counted her earnings, a fraction hers after Madame Kaori's share. She lay on her futon, the distant sound of the Kamo River lulling her, and dreamed of her tea house, where she could serve tea and share her poetry freely. For now, she was Gion's star, her life a performance, her heart a quiet verse battling the debts and dreams that shaped her. The Persian merchant's travels. In the sun-baked city of Persepolis in 500 BCE, where the Apollona Palace loomed over bustling markets, Darius, a merchant of 35, prepared his caravan for a journey along the royal road to Sardis. His life was one of trade and adventure, his survival tied to the spices, textiles, and gems he bartered across the Achaemenid Empire. Persepolis thrummed with traders, scribes, and nobles, and Darius's goods, saffron, lapis lazuli, and silk, were prized by elites and merchants alike. His wife, Roxana, managed their household, her thrift ensuring their stability during his long absences. Their marriage was a partnership rooted in necessity and warmed by affection, their personal life a private bond overshadowed by the demands of trade and family duty. Darius's path as a merchant began at 18, when he joined his father's caravans, learning to navigate the royal road's dusty paths and haggle in foreign tongues. By 25, he led his own caravan, a train of camels laden with goods, guided by maps and stars. His home, a mud-brick house with a tiled courtyard in Persepolis's merchant's quarter, was a haven between journeys. Survival depended on safe travels and shrewd deals, as bandits, storms, or failed trades could ruin him. Roxana, married to Darius at 22, was his anchor, her hands deft at weaving rugs and managing their stores. Their bond, forged in hardship, grew into quiet love. Darius's journeys began in spring, when the roads were dry. He rose at dawn, the air fragrant with cedar, to load camels with saffron from Persis, lapis from Bactria, and silk from distant lands. His caravan, 10 men and 20 camels, moved in rhythm, their songs echoing over the plains. Darius navigated by landmarks and stars, praying to Ahura Mazda for protection. In Sardis, he bartered spices for Greek wine and silver, his voice firm as he haggled with merchants. Failure meant returning empty-handed, a blow to his family's survival. He offered incense at roadside shrines, seeking favor for his travels. Roxana was the heart of their home. She wove rugs with intricate patterns, sold at Persepolis's market, and tended a garden of figs and pomegranates. Their house, with a clay hearth and woven mats, was shared with their son, Cyrus, who played with clay seals. Meals were simple: barley bread, lentil stew, and wine, supplemented by dates when Darius's trades earned extra. Roxana bartered rugs for oil or wool, her thrift ensuring their stores lasted through lean times. They celebrated festivals, like Nowruz, offering grain to Ahura Mazda, their dances under torchlight a communal joy. Roxana's strength held the household together during Darius's absences, her letters, scribed on clay by a neighbor, carrying news to him in distant markets. Survival required community. Darius traveled with other merchants, sharing guards and tales, their laughter a respite from toil. Roxana joined women to weave and gossip, their hands moving in rhythm. They paid taxes in silver to the king, a burden Darius met by trading wisely. He kept tallies on clay tablets, marking sales with cuneiform, though a scribe recorded larger deals. Bandits were a constant threat, and Darius carried a bronze dagger, its hilt worn from use. One summer, a sandstorm delayed his caravan, forcing him to barter extra saffron to cover losses. Roxana faced a drought, trading rugs for grain to feed Cyrus. Their marriage was a partnership, intimacy a private bond in quiet moments, a shared cup of wine, a laugh over Cyrus's games. Persian custom valued restraint, and their affection was expressed in actions. Darius bringing Roxana a lapis pendant, she weaving a cloak for his travels. One year, Darius journeyed to Babylon, a month-long trek to trade silk for gold. The route was fraught. Bandits attacked near Susa, and Darius's men fought them off, his dagger bloodied. Roxana, at home, wove a ceremonial rug for a noble, earning enough to buy a goat. Their reunion was joyful, marked by a feast of roasted lamb and tales of their trials. Darius dreamed of a larger caravan, perhaps trading to India, but survival came first. He repaired his camels' harnesses, their leather worn, and helped Roxana plant barley, their hands working as one. As years passed, Darius's reputation grew. A satrap commissioned 100 pounds of saffron, a windfall that bought a new camel. He taught Cyrus to count silver, his small hands mimicking his. At night, Darius and Roxana sat by their courtyard, the stars bright, their bond a steady flame in a life of trade and toil. Darius's world was road and spice, his life a testament to his skill and the love that anchored him to Persepolis's heart.